Chinese Communist Party is building border villages in Tibet to claim disputed territory and give the PLA a huge advantage in a war with India. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Surfshark. Whenever you go online, if you want to protect your identity, you should be using a VPN, like Surfshark. So last week, the Chinese Communist Party celebrated the 70th anniversary of the peaceful liberation of Tibet. And the Communist Party is also using this anniversary to advance their territorial claims against India and Bhutan. During the celebrations, the Chinese Communist Party emphasized the importance of the Tibetan border. And they specifically said it was because of border clashes with India. Now, this isn't just the Global Times saying that the party will expand border construction. Chinese leader Xi Jinping himself said it when he visited Tibet last month, after he was done watching all of the happy ethnic dancing. See, look at how happy those Tibetans are under communist rule. In fact, to demonstrate how important border construction is to the party, Xi Jinping didn't just visit Tibet's capital, Lhasa. He also visited another city in southeast Tibet, Ningxi. The city is close to the line of actual control, the border between India and China, along the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. China claims a huge chunk of that region. Earlier this year, the Chinese regime completed a strategic highway to Ningxi at a cost of more than $300 million. The highway will allow the People's Liberation Army to mobilize troops and military equipment faster to the line of actual control. That's also one way to tell the Chinese regime is serious about border construction, the amount of money they're dropping on it. According to Chinese officials, 21 border counties in Tibet are all receiving aid from the central and national level governmental departments. And the Communist Party has another advantage over India in their border dispute: the ability to move people around to border areas. According to this foreign policy article, China is using Tibetans as their agents of empire in the Himalayas. In the past few years, the population of the border regions in Tibet has increased by 10%, according to Chinese officials. For years, the Chinese Communist Party has been forcibly resettling Tibetan herders, making them quit their nomadic lifestyles to live in the more centralized cities and towns in Tibet. It's easier to control people when they're not moving around all the time. But now the party is changing their policy again by moving Tibetans into the borderlands instead of to cities. And Tibetan residents of these remote border villages should be happy because they're protecting China's sacred territory. So China building permanent villages along the Tibetan border is concerning, not just because they're using Tibetans to strengthen the Communist Party's territorial claims, or because the party is also building infrastructure like highways that could move their military rapidly to disputed borders with India, but also because in some cases, the Chinese regime is purposefully building these settlements across the border in another country's territory. More after the break. Welcome back. So the Communist Party is building border villages and infrastructure to help them win territorial disputes with India. But China also has territorial disputes with other countries, like Bhutan. Bhutan is a lot weaker than India. And so the Chinese regime is pushing Bhutan much harder. In fact, the Chinese Communist Party has literally built entire villages in Bhutan. It's part of a salami slicing strategy that the party has also used in the South China Sea to gradually take over that area. In 2015, the Chinese regime started building a Tibetan village in Bhutan. It's in an area in northern Bhutan that China has claimed since ancient times, the 1980s. Okay, the 1980s is when China started claiming that territory. They're basing their claims on historical documents that show Tibetan monasteries had grazing rights in that area during the Qing dynasty. The rest of the world recognizes that territory as part of Bhutan. And in just 6 years, the Communist Party hasn't just built a village in Bhutan. They've built 3 villages, along with new roads, a small hydropower station, 2 Communist Party administrative centers, a communications base, a disaster relief warehouse, 5 military or police outposts, and what are believed to be a major signals tower, a satellite receiving station, a military base, and up to 6 security sites and outposts. They've been pretty busy, and Bhutan probably didn't even know this was happening. That's because the Communist Party didn't start with building a village. They started back in the 1990s by using Tibetan herders to bully Bhutanese herders out of the area. The Bhutanese accused Tibetans of cattle rustling, collecting timber, constructing shelters, driving huge consolidated flocks of yaks across traditional Bhutanese grazing lands, and demanding that Bhutanese herders pay taxes to them for grazing there. This is exactly what the Chinese regime did in the South China Sea, except they used big Chinese fishing boats to harass smaller fishing boats from countries like the Philippines and Vietnam. So instead of China's maritime militia, this is China's Himalayan yak patrol. And it worked. The Tibetan herders drove the Bhutanese herders further south, and the Bhutanese army went with the herders. So now no one was there to object when China started building their artificial islands. Sorry, I mean border villages. It's so easy to get mixed up. In a lot of ways, what's happening in Bhutan is China's test run for what it could do in the border regions with India. Since Bhutan was easier to bully, the Chinese regime started with them. But it's only a matter of time before they expand their salami slicing into India. In fact, earlier this year, satellite images showed that China had built a village across the Indian border in Arunachal Pradesh. But India is involved in the Bhutan border dispute in another way. You see, the Chinese Communist Party doesn't actually want the land it's taken over in northern Bhutan. Instead, the party wants to trade it to Bhutan for land in western Bhutan that's closer to the border with India. Its aim is to force the Bhutanese government to cede territory that China wants elsewhere in Bhutan to give Beijing a military advantage in its struggle with New Delhi. The area that the Chinese regime wants is strategically significant. It's only 62 miles from India's geographic weak point, the 14-mile-wide Siliguri corridor that connects India to its northeastern territories. A pretty handy spot to have if there's a border war with India. For years, Bhutan has resisted giving up that territory. It's allies with India and depends on the Indian military for defense. And India would have a huge problem with this, so Bhutan is unlikely to do it. That's one reason the Chinese regime is using the added pressure of directly settling in Bhutan's territory. Another reason is that it's using these Tibetan border village residents to patrol the border areas along with border police and the PLA, which expands China's forces in the disputed border regions. This isn't just happening in a few villages across the border with Bhutan, it's happening across Tibet, in over 600 villages built so far since just 2017. Official rhetoric requires their residents to make every village a fortress and every household a watch post, and terms their residents soldiers without uniforms. Their primary task is to guard China's borders. And it's not just rhetoric. Residents are organized into plainclothes security teams that patrol the border, checking for other Tibetans trying to flee into exile. And that's not all. The villagers in each border village have to join forces with border police and PLA units to form joint defense teams that include villagers, uniformed security forces, and party representatives. So given the strategic on-the-ground benefits from the Chinese Communist Party, it's no surprise that they're planning to accelerate building more border villages. The villages give the Chinese Communist Party a bigger military presence in disputed regions. They allow the party to intimidate weaker neighbors like Bhutan and directly settle in their territory. And the party gains valuable experience to eventually use against tougher neighbors like India. The big question is, could this lead to war with India? It depends on what India does when the Chinese regime starts building these border villages across the line of actual control. If India doesn't respond, the Chinese regime will just keep pushing like it did in the South China Sea. And this episode has been sponsored by Surfshark. When you go online, especially in China, you need to be using a VPN like Surfshark to protect your identity. Every time you go on the internet, governments and your internet service provider can see everything you do. And I think China's military has enough spying outposts already, thank you very much. So whenever you go online, especially if you ever use public Wi-Fi, you really should be using Surfshark to protect yourself. Plus, you can use one Surfshark account across an unlimited number of devices. So if you need a VPN, and believe me, you do, check out Surfshark. Go to surfshark.com/uncensored and use the code UNCENSORED to get their special deal that includes 3 extra months for free. Click the link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.